In 2022, the band Jady released their debut album entitled The Haze, which introduced listeners both to their music and the conceptual world which they were building. In this video, I'll walk through and review the album track by track. The first song is called The Haze, and it is a wonderful introduction to the album, setting up the tone for the next 10 songs, and lyrically introducing the listener to the lore-filled fantasy world. The world is described as being a dark, cold, foggy place full of lies and deceit. There's also a strong sense of loneliness. Despite being surrounded and constantly repeating the phrase, "In the haze, I'm not alone." The singer, the lead figure of the story, may not be alone, but those who surround him are enemies and demons, tempting him to follow them into madness. He finds comfort in the thought of home, away from all this noise and chaos, but is clearly unsure of how to get there. The next chapter in the story continues the exposition with an explanation of a peculiar item, known as the rose-colored lenses, through which one enters the haze, and steps away from the pain and tragedy that reality can bring into this color-filled world of joy and optimism. He explains that he feels trapped in this world of darkness and wants to return to the world of light, but is told and convinced that if he just puts the lenses and the glasses on, he will be able to see it all. Having put them on, he finds himself in something he describes as the upside down, which implies an inversion of sorts of reality. And now he no longer wants to go home. He continues to insist that he wants to be left alone, to just stay here. But finally, at the end of the song, he hears a voice which convinces him that he must try to leave. Entropy picks up right where RCL left off. Having put on the red-colored lenses, he began to see the world around him through a red-colored view, which caused him to no longer fear the darkness, but instead fear the light, as a result of having dwelt in the darkness for too long. We see this line. They were saying optimism was the way to sight, indulging in a fantastical version of hope, instead of one grounded in reality. He calls out to the voice referenced at the end of RCL, asking to be saved and rescued that he may once more return to the light and enjoy it. This song is probably my personal favorite off of the album. In the next song, Inverted Forest, we see that he has woken up to the fact that the rose-colored lenses are just presenting him with a false version of reality. Furthermore, this false, idyllic reality is not actually helping to solve anything, and he becomes more determined in his resolve to escape this world and return to what is actually true. But he is also beginning to question what he even knows anymore, having been under the influence of these lenses for so long. On an interesting note, this song also contains the first reference to silver screen broadcasting, this silver enterprise. The fifth track on the album, Modern Era, presents the hypocrisy of our modern day sentiment that you can be anything you want as long as you don't be that guy, as long as you don't do anything objectionable. Obviously, there's truth to the latter sentiment. You don't want to imitate or follow in the footsteps of the morally bankrupt, but this instead exposes the lie behind the idea that you can be whatever you want to be. It's good to have goals and desires that you aspire to and work towards, but these must be grounded in reality, or else your efforts will likely end up futile, and reality will remind you of its existence at some point anyway. I see 1970 as sort of a metaphor for the fantasy world which JD is slipping into, a place where everything feels joyful, but none of it truly is. As he mentions, indulging in this fantasy is a fallacy, but one which he is easily tempted by. Overall, I found this to be one of the weaker songs on the album, both lyrically and sonically. The album's pacing slows down significantly for this next song, Gravitate, which shifts from the storyline into a love song of sorts. This is one of 3 songs which don't fit explicitly into the story which JD is building, but sit quite well on the album nonetheless. The next song, Candy, is even more explicitly a love song than the one that came before it. It is essentially a marriage proposal turned into song. He explains, "I don't hand out my last name like it's candy, but you can take it now in a heartbeat." Definitely a more fun, upbeat vibe before shifting back to a darker tone as the album begins to draw to a close. Medication is perhaps the most underrated song on this album, and maybe even in JD's discography as a whole. It is a thoughtful and introspective discussion of struggles with faith and mental illness. It acknowledges that the things, the drugs of this world, can never truly replace the need we have for God. It has a beautifully crafted sound and lyrics, and is certainly one of the best songs on this album. Track 10 is another love song, and arguably the most connected to the lore of the three. It is about finding hope and a trace of the sun in the darkness through someone you know, someone who's close to you, who is able to reflect that light and truth. But it also acknowledges that they are not the light itself, and there's more to be discovered and embraced beyond them. And then we have, finally, Sunseekers, which is a great closing track of the album. It can also be seen as the beginning of the Sunseekers movement, as they begin to search for a way to escape the darkness of the haze. But there is also a loop at the end of this song which leads straight back into the beginning of the first song, The Haze, signifying that they are still stuck in this fantasy world at the end of this album, despite realizing the need to escape and return to reality. Throughout this entire album, we can see that there is this theme of fantasy versus reality being explored. It is easy to escape into a fantasy made-up world in order to escape from the painful, unpleasant things of reality. Ultimately, though, something deep within you will remind you that this fantasy world is not real, and the joy you find within it is nothing more than a hollow shell of lies. It is always better to pursue reality and truth, even if you might find that truth to be unpleasant. The Haze is an excellent album as a whole, and lyrically very well done. It explores interesting and compelling ideas and themes in a clear and thoughtful way that manages to not become too on the nose. And it is a great narrative introduction to the world of the Haze. With that being said, thank you for watching, and be sure to comment your own thoughts on this album below, and don't forget to subscribe for more music commentary and reviews.